Look, the industry was already challenged, before all this happened, and now there's just all of these layers, that have been added to it. And I guess it just depends on how long people are prepared to stick with it and fight for, whatever it is that they've got.
I'm Dani Valent, and this is Dirty Linen, the podcast that takes the issues the hospitality industry finds hard to air in public and shakes them all about. We're launching the series with When Rules Change, because in Victoria, on Saturday, June 20, the goalposts were shifted, the rules changed, and Daniel Andrews made an announcement.
The planned opening up of restaurants and cafes, going from 20 patrons per enclosed space to 50 patrons per enclosed space, has been deferred.
This is devastating for restaurants. It's bad news. For some restaurants, it means they won't be able to reopen at all. Alla has changed the face of regional dining in Australia. Her lake house, restaurant and rooms and spa and now farm and bakery has been in Daylesford for 3 decades. She's a legend, she's always doing something new, and she really has always set the benchmark for Australian regional hospitality. Alla, how are you doing today?
One day at a time, Dani, one day at a time.
It's a bit like that, isn't it? We were all ready for restaurant numbers to increase this week, but that hasn't happened. What does that mean for Lake House?
Some just some more work. Look, it's, I had a sharp intake of breath when we first heard, and kind of just so many things, because it was the evening when I heard, and Saturday night, so and sharp intake of breath and trying to work out what we had to do immediately, because we had been banking on it. Whether we should have banked on it or not is a difficult thing to say, but because we had school holidays coming up and a fairly big demand, we have taken bookings. We have taken bookings up to that number. So, the immediate thing was we need to let people know. We need to try and work out what we can do for them, and so just a whole spin of things. I mean, it's the way you think every day now, because every procedure that you've had in place is changing almost daily to cope with some new. It's not a new reg, it's just a whole new way of doing things, and the unintended consequences of a lot of what we now call the new normal. So, look, you've just got to stay vigilant and on your toes a lot. I must have been rung by about a dozen people from the industry straight away saying, what are you doing, how are you managing? Because a lot of people, it's probably not as bad for us because we've kept the whole team pretty much together since we closed. But a lot of people in other places have actually stood down their staff completely or made them redundant, and have now brought them back on because they thought that they could reopen. They didn't reopen for 20, but have now reopened for 50. So that was interesting, but I did a bit of pursuit on that today, and apparently the Fair Work regs will allow them to stand people down again. So it's messy. It's messy. Look, there's no one to blame. It's just what it is, it's just a really difficult situation, and everyone has to stay safe, and we do have to watch how we do things, and I think we'll be watching how we do things almost forever. I mean, these SARS things are not going to go away. There'll be some other new one, it seems to be, maybe we've not had the vigilant protocols necessary in our population. And this is an opportunity to do it.
Well, we're certainly getting good at washing our hands, that's for sure.
Well, it's not such a bad thing. It's not. Look, I'm trying to look for the silver linings. I honestly am. It's just tough. Look, the industry was already challenged, before all this happened, and now there's just all of these layers. that have been added to it. And I guess it just depends on how long people are prepared to stick with it and fight for, whatever it is that they've got. I know a lot of people are just sort of going too hard, let's just run a takeout business or let's just close our doors. There's no question. People are doing that already. They've made those decisions already, and that's only, 3 months after closure. So who knows what's going to happen after September.
Yeah, that's a cliff that we're all moving towards. You mentioned, just a couple of minutes ago that it's a spin, and I think that's such a good word to use. It's almost like you're always being called to look in a different direction and find that there's a new surprise there. Does it feel, I guess, like very personally destabilizing?
You know, the thing is that you do feel destabilised. What keeps you stable is the team. You look at them and you think, these are people that we love, respect. We've trained in a lot of cases. We've got them permanent residency in a lot of cases. They deserve to be stood by. I guess, at our age, we could just kind of walk out, just give up. So they stabilise you. And the other thing is the guests, the guests that have been coming for years and just want to come back. They tell you every day. They ring up and tell you every day, just make sure that, by September, you can do our, whatever it is, anniversary, birthday, whatever, that they kind of, our places, I'm sure the walls are soaked with wonderful times. It's developed this pattern of being a place where people have had a good time, and the expectation is really strong that you'll keep delivering, and so that expectation keeps you buoyant to a certain extent. Every now and then you kind of hit the wall and barely hang on. But it's what you do. It's what you do in life. I mean, it's hard to kind of. So what would I rather be doing? Well, I would prefer that it was less strenuous and stressful at the moment. But you swing in, the service swings into place, and people are having a good time, and there's that sort of gentle hum of conversation and people having drinks, and for 2 hours you kind of think everything's right with the world. You can close everything else out for a bit, so it's a bit of a bubble. Look, it's challenging, and the future of the industry is going to be a huge challenge, I think, for everyone.
I mean, we've talked about that for years, haven't we? It's not, it hasn't been rosy for a long time. Do you think that the pandemic has caused some of the cracks to tear apart a little more widely?
I think anyone who now can't see how fragile this industry is would have to be blind or deaf and dumb, because it's not like there was a whole lot of people out there running businesses badly. There may have been some, but, there were a lot of very good operators out there, and what worries me is that career restaurateurs are going to walk away from the industry. I mean, there will always be unsustainable small businesses and people who should never have gotten into it at all, who kind of saw volume in places, oh gosh, this place is so busy, they must be raking it in, and it's profitless volume. And they don't understand the industry, and they've gone into it for all the wrong reasons, and then they've kind of become bitter about the fact that, they're running an unsustainable business, and then there's the slide to non-compliance. Compliance is bloody expensive, collecting tax on behalf of the government and paying payroll tax for every single person you employ over a certain level. What an iniquitous, what a ridiculous tax, especially in the regions where, you're trying to create jobs. Fancy having to pay for every additional person that you take on, extra tax for every person you take on. I mean, all of those things have been building and building, starting from the GST when we had to start collecting that and adding it on to the price of something so we could never separate it out. So that year that we had to hike everything up by 10%, everyone thought that we'd hiked all our prices up 10%. Well, no one had, and so what you normally would add onto your increase, which may have been 2 or 3%, we didn't for 2 years. So that was the beginning of that. Then the fringe benefits tax came in. There's been things over the years that have created the difficulty, and the one size fits all rule, which for everything, even for this current curveball, which is you can't have 50 people in the dining room, you've got to have 20. Well, goodness, the hospitality industry is made up of tiny little holes in the wall where people for whom 20 is not possible, much less 50. However, they still need to make a buck, or there's big restaurants in hotels that need to have 300 covers a night in order to meet their costs. So 50 isn't going to cut it. So this kind of compliance model, which is the same with the awards, the same award works for the big multinational hotels and the Mar and Parkettle tiny little place in the country and the gastro pub that relies on how much beer it sells, and for the upmarket restaurant and people who do breakfast and people who don't do lunch. I mean, it's just a crazy complex situation that everyone has to comply to in the same way. And it's the same with these new regs, like 20 today and 50 tomorrow. No, then we're back to 20. I mean, there are going to be some victims, some particular victims of particular requirements out of this, massive number of victims. And I'm not sure how you fix that, and I'm not sure what the solution is. I'm sure governments are struggling. They're struggling certainly over the current situation with this coronavirus because, the most important thing is that we remain safe, that we all remain safe as a country, and generally we've been doing really well, and who wants the horrors of what's been happening overseas? But, for people like me who have got a long-term vested interest and deep love for an industry that I think has been a vital part of the character development of our country, I bleed for it. I bleed for its future. Alan and I have been through several crises before, financial crises before, including the recession that we had to have, according to Paul Keating, 87 to 91. And what we saw at the end of that was interesting because you could pick up the shell of a restaurant, completely kitted out for $10,000. We're going to see that now. We're going to see that now with people walking out of places, landlords being left with a shell, and they will be offering, a year's free rent and, pick this up and, pay us rent in a year because they need tenants. And young people are going to see places for $10,000, $15,000, $25,000 completely kitted out, with rationale ovens and, just everything that opens and shuts, and they're going to see this as some kind of opportunity. It's not.
It makes me scared to think of those people. I mean, I'm sure you'd get some great restaurants out of that, but I feel like you'd get a lot of businesses that were perhaps not sustainable without that assistance.
Well, they're not sustainable. That's the whole thing. I mean, look, people go into restaurants for a whole lot of reasons. I mean, they go into the industry for a whole lot of reasons. And some of them go in with the notion that, it's some kind of get-rich scheme. Well, I mean, it's crazy to think that, because if you have a look at any one period of time at how many places were on the market, maybe quietly on the market, but were struggling to sell even before the coronavirus, you would get some idea of the perils of the industry. It breaks my heart when I see young people, lose their house because they've mortgaged it, and they see something as an opportunity, and they quite often are blinded by volume. I mean, the fact is that the old model, I still remember the dreams of being a chef owner of a small place, a small place which was 20, 30 covers, tiny little place that you could manage on your own. And, those kind of chef operated places are not sustainable unless you are able to charge an awful lot um, for for a seat at the table. And there's not many. I mean, I guess people with a global kind of reputation, and that's why the global reputations are so highly sought, amongst sort of international influencers and people that come in and Instagram your food, and then you get onto some sort of list, and then you're fine as long as no one closes the borders on you.
Well, that's it. A global reputation's not of much use right now when no one can jump on a plane and Instagram your restaurant for you.
That's right, but it was a model. It was a model there. So in terms of the kinds of business models that we've had, that was one possibility. And you had to catch the attention of certain people and do certain things. And then you became a celebrity, and then, people would come, and you were on a bucket list. So people wouldn't necessarily return, but, they'd come overseas and they'd say, well, we've ticked off, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and off to the next one. So there was that model, and I think that was highly aspirational for a lot of young chefs. And then there's the ones that think that they're going to make a lot of money. I can remember about maybe 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, when the first kind of like really big celebrity chef thing kind of popped out of nowhere. Before, there were sort of small numbers of very highly profiled chefs, but all of a sudden there were quite a lot of them. And lo and behold, interviewing young cooks, and you'd ask them the normal question like, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And they used to talk about getting day television shows or a book deal within 5 years. so,
Right.
so there's a whole lot of reasons why people go into restaurants, and then there's the megalopolises, which is people are brought out by an equity company, or there's a developer that already has lots of money, and this is a bit of a playtime thing, and they'll start off with a relatively well-known chef, and they'll have maybe two restaurants, and then of course when the money doesn't come in at the sort of profit level, that suddenly they, this silent investor suddenly says, well, I'm not a silent investor anymore, and starts demanding their pound of flesh, and next minute they need 6 restaurants or 7 restaurants or whatever. And, what happens is, that at the helm there's a really good craftsman, a really good restaurateur, a really good chef, but you see the gradual erosion, because who can do that? Who can keep their eye out? It's hard enough to keep your eye on one place and do it well. Who can do that, to keep an eye out on a whole lot of different places and have it run with love and attention and care and nurturing? I mean, it's a different model, and some of them do make money because they centralise all of their administration and resources and HR and payroll and all that kind of back of house stuff that everyone has to comply with. So sometimes, because they're able to cut that, they do make a better margin. But is that what we want? And I guess we all end up with the restaurants we deserve, the politicians we deserve, and the restaurants we deserve.
You've had some, health issues in your own life that have made it really critical for you to stay healthy and stay away from people that are sick at the moment. Can you talk about that, and about how that's affected the way that you can manage Lake House through this pandemic?
Well, I've been loath to talk about it, but I'm happy to talk about it from the point of view of um, things could be worse, So, yes, I mean, last year, just before Christmas, I got diagnosed with a particularly aggressive form of cancer, and I've had a kind of a nasty journey since then. Well, the beginning of the journey was actually quite nice because I was told, even though there were bushfires raging around Australia and we already had some problems, but because I was told by all the people that matter in my kind of treatment that I had to, for the first time in a long time, really look after myself and make myself number one and care for myself. I had an initial, while I had operations and the beginning of some nasty treatments and things. I did. I spent some time in the sun on my balcony, read a few books, ventured down to the restaurant a little bit more rarely, slept a lot, and I thought, I think I won't be able to do this forever, but this is rather nice. But then, of course, we got the coronavirus, which was worrying to begin with, and then we got closure, which was seriously worrying. So it's an added layer of impost because my immune system is highly compromised. So I've had to go for a period of time without seeing family or friends or staff and running all my meetings on Skype and Zoom and whatever. Even though I can see the restaurant from the lounge room window, I wasn't going to do Morse code, so I was on the screen a lot talking to staff and teams and everything and keeping morale up. But honestly, in the last couple of weeks, when we've had to try and turn the ship around for opening, I've just given up on that. I mean, hang it, it's just too difficult. So, and the adrenaline kicks in because you've got to get in there and fight for everything.
So you're in the restaurant?
Well, I've been down there a lot annoying people. I've been down there a lot annoying people and having meetings and, keeping morale up. And also the comms, the communication to staff is critical over this because they're worried about their own lives. And we've had exactly what, we had close to 30 people out of our 100 plus staff who had fallen through the cracks in terms of assistance from government. So we had been, doing free rent and work for some rent kind of stuff and work for some food boxes from our farm and ran a little produce store to try and keep a few people employed during this time and generally kept everyone on the books and having their leave accruing. So the team basically is still together. So when we reopened, it's the same team, and we reopened just for the long weekend to start off with, 4 days a week. We thought we'd capitalise on that straight away, and it was the right thing to do because the demand is out there. Bless them, all our guests. So there was a huge peak. I don't know how long that's going to last. I mean, people were just so anxious to travel out of Melbourne and just get away from their houses and apartments. And, what we can guarantee them is that we'll give them a good time, but we'll give them as safe a time as possible because we put all our staff through training and, we have all the protocols in place. And, we've had some people come and actually work from here, like move into one of our suites. And
really?
Yes.
Oh, that actually sounds quite appealing.
Yeah, take a few days just away from the same four walls and come up here. And we have got sort of Prada speed NBN now, so they can do a lot of things here. Look, I think it's the way of the future anyway. I think a lot of people are going to work from home, and I think a lot of people are going to move into the regions because they can. And
you should get National Cabinet in there, Alla. I reckon National Cabinet could set up at Lake House for a while and you can sort out the restaurant industry, get rid of that fringe benefits tax, sort out payroll tax, just get it all done at once.
I'll need to tell you that the National Cabinet of both colours tends to run whenever I come anywhere near them. I think they have heard from me loud and clear over the years over many, many issues. Predominantly the availability of a decent workforce for the industry, which has been critical in our reliance on overseas skilled migrants. And it's not just our industry. I mean, it's interesting, fitters and turners, we don't train fitters and turners, and, there were massive closures of big companies that I knew, when you weren't allowed to, or they had restricted the number of working holiday visas coming from the Philippines, who apparently train a lot of fitters and turners. There's kind of anomalies like that. It's sort of weird.
It is,
It's
yeah.
yeah, it is. Look, it's difficult, but anyway, look, I think that I think the industry, was the industry in peril? Yes, it was. Is it going to get worse? I think it is. And we do have to watch for the lack of sustainability in restaurants opening up, because, and the media has some responsibility in this. I understand, I've got lots of friends like you amongst the colleagues amongst the industry, and the answer is always, look, we work for the guests, for the public, and if there's someone down the road who is selling incredible food incredibly cheaply, then we need to tell them about it. And I get that, but when that restaurant falls over in 18 months' time or 2 years' time, but also brings down a whole lot of other people around it because of there are some streets in Melbourne where I reckon there must be suburban streets in Melbourne where, you walk the length of 2 blocks and there's 32 places selling breakfast,
This is true.
and well, and they're all trying hard. They're all trying hard. Like, no one's sitting around being lazy. They're all trying really, really hard. But are there too many? And if the only selling proposition is that you do something really special but a lot less expensively, then that is not sustainable. And I can tell you that compliance is the most expensive thing in the industry. So whether you're complying to a very complex award, or the payment of penalty rates, or the payment of superannuation, or the forward payment of tax, or the umpteen things that you now have to do as being part of the industry, all of those things add up. So even if you're a small place, a tiny place, you're going to have to either you're going to have to do your accounting at 2 o'clock in the morning to juggle all this stuff. And what it does is it makes people slide into non-compliance. And once you get non-compliance, then you're in real trouble. People go into the cash economy simply because they end up having to do that because they can't comply. And when you're in the cash economy, people don't get paid super. Government doesn't collect the GST, so it's 10% off everything. People don't get trained. Career professionals don't take those jobs, and so you get this. It's not a real industry. It's a fragile kind of industry. It's not a career type industry where we're building careers for people, long-term careers for people. It's a kind of fly-by-night industry, and it doesn't feel sound to me. It doesn't feel sound to me at all.
Yeah, I don't know that that's not the type of business that you've created. Like pulling back a bit from all that detail that it's so easy to get mired in as a business owner, or you can't help but be. You have to be to have a sustainable business. But what is the reason that you run restaurants? Like, what is the ultimate goal for you?
What's the ultimate goal? Well, I mean, it's like saying to a surgeon, why are you a surgeon? I mean, it's the same. It's what you do and you enjoy most in life, or you find, if you're lucky enough to find something that you're prepared to work hard for and still enjoy, then that's kind of like a blessing. I mean, there's so many unhappy lawyers and dentists out there, doing things that they don't want to be doing. So I think if you find something that you really love doing and it suits you, the trick is, how do you do it for a long time? And that's where you do have to start thinking about building the size of your business, because you can't keep doing what you do forever. So I couldn't do the hours in the kitchen forever. I had to eventually replace myself to a certain extent, and then the interesting thing is that the new things that I was learning were quite captivating anyhow, which was how to make the business more sustainable, how to be a better leader, how to motivate people, how to get people really interested in the career of the industry I love. I mean, there was a whole kind of layering that happened over the years that satisfied me, I guess. I mean, you should only keep doing it while it satisfies you, because when it stops satisfying you, I mean, you just become you become like a bitter, twisted lawyer who doesn't want to be doing it anymore. It doesn't matter which industry you're in. If it's the wrong one for you, it's not worth staying in.
Is it because there are so many different aspects to restaurants? I mean, I guess there's the people, there's the produce, there's the guest experience, there's those people that are ringing up and asking you to create the magic for them. Is it that there are so many different aspects to being a restaurateur that you love it?
Well, there are so many different things, but I guess the biggest one is that sense of you are but one member of the orchestra. You may be the conductor, but when that orchestra swings into action and it plays beautifully together, there is nothing else like it. It's just like it's like honeyed syrup. I can't even tell you, because when service is it just like, it's the patterner of the procedures that you've put into place that when it all works together like clockwork. And the great thing is that you get the satisfaction of instant gratitude. You don't wait for someone to pay the bill, in 6 months' time. They tell you as they're leaving, look, we had the best time and we're coming back. So it's like curtain up and you deliver a performance and you get the instant feedback. I mean, I'm sure that's what keeps people on stage. And we put on a performance every single time, whether it's breakfast, lunch or dinner or, whatever it is. It's a performance. It's a performance that, you've got to love in order for it to have any kind of truth behind it. So it's addictive. Yes, you do hit the wall. Yes, if you're trying to run it as a business, I think it's probably harder and harder and harder nowadays, which is why career restaurateurs are walking away from it. And maybe there's now, certainly amongst the bigger players, developers as investors and equity groups as investors, and rather than career restaurateurs as investors, or people that simply don't know and get into it for silly reasons, which is a worry. But I think the true career, and I mean, I was very fortunate to have spent time in kitchens very young, that were just amazing places, where, the Roger Verger, for example, Cuisine of the Sun, Georges Blanc, in Vonard. These places were regional restaurants with amazing followings, but also they were so grounded in their local region. They were just mind-bogglingly beautiful, with a great sense of place. And for me, it began the love affair for me. And then when I saw that relationship that those places had with their suppliers, where the producer, the grower, would come in the morning and share a little, little charged espresso that had a shot of cognac in it as well, and chef would stand at the back door with speaking to whoever's brought the zucchini flowers in the morning, and sometimes they were dealing with a second generation grower, and they'd talk about the cousin down the road who was growing radishes or something else. And there was this sort of kind of sense of being part of that region. That became a love affair for me. There was no question that's what I wanted. I just had no idea why I wanted it. I now get it. I now get why I wanted it and why it was important to those people at that time. And it's a whole complex thing. It's not just getting, gee, aren't my carrots good because they've come from down the road. It's part of this strong community network of, we have so many people that rely on Lake House in this region. Every contractor, every carpenter, every fridge mechanic, every electrician, every person that does painting and upholstery. We're the biggest client for a lot of those people, and again, we're dealing with sometimes second generation, and that's on top of the growers and the winemakers. I mean, we've got a winemaker just up the road who is second generation now, passing clouds, and there are other similar suppliers around that region, and it's that sense of being part of a community. And that's why I'm fighting so hard for what's happening now to a certain extent, because when we built here, when we bought the land here in 1979, it was a very fractured, down at heel little town with 21% unemployment, much like the rest of regional Australia at the time. And there were no small suppliers. It was all contract, big farms, monocropping, selling food out of the region, nothing destined for local tables. There was no sense of that. We'd lost that peasant class, that opportunity to have a peasant class in Australia, which is another whole story. But, what we have now is a very strong, generally resilient community, very tightly knit, very creative, and growing. Growing. It's not a retirement community. It's growing with young families moving here because it's a good place to live and work, and it's an easy commute into Melbourne. And, we've got more kids going to local schools now than ever before. They're struggling for places. So it's a growing community. So it's very gratifying. So you've got to fight for that. And we employ 110 people in this town. So
yeah, it's an amazing layered phenomenon that you've built and that you've brought to Central Victoria, layer by layer, year by year, over 3 decades. It really is incredible. So, Alla, when I come up to Daylesford next, and I'm eavesdropping on National Cabinet that you've got in one of the conference areas there, and it's time for my lunch, and I come into the restaurant and I'm in that warm bubble, the hum, and I sit down on one of those beautiful cushioned banquettes. What will I have for lunch? Tell me a dish that I must order.
well, how our menus work. I mean, it's whatever we're pulling out of the ground or whatever is coming from down the road, possibly, because the seasons are very, very easily felt here. So it's a real bonus whether you're a cook or a gardener, because you know exactly where you are with the seasons. And we've had a lot of frost, which means it's good for truffles. So there's a good chance we'll get some local truffle any minute. Certainly harvesting at our farm at the moment, there's masses of Jerusalem artichokes, and people kind of get a bit huffy about Jerusalem artichokes. They think that that they have a bad reputation in terms of your digestion, but they're absolutely delicious.
I love them.
They can be they can be just beautiful. We've done them, whole roasted. Well, we do them differently, but we have had them roasted completely so that they're caramelised on the outside and just warm and gooey in the inside, and just top them with creme fraiche and some house smoked roe on top, So it's kind of the poor man's root vegetable with the sort of elegance and grace and luxury of caviar on top. But
that sounds so good.
well, we do a lot around vegetables now because we've got the massive farm, so that's only going to increase. And we've had a great harvest this year. Lots of mustard leaves, sorrel. Funnily enough, we've still got sorrel in the hoop houses. Lots of herbs, and we've got all of our spring plantings. But you'll always get seasonal things. You come here in spring and there'll be lots of beautiful spring things: lamb and broad beans and asparagus and lots of things to look forward to. And I think that's the thing. We need to look forward as much as we possibly can.
Absolutely. Well, it's always too long between visits to Lake House, but I'm definitely looking forward to the next time I go there. I hope there aren't too many new things to spin around, and I know that you guys are going to come out thriving and just thrilling people with your hospitality. We know it's not going to be an easy road, but I know you're going to tread along it bravely and beautifully. So thank you so much for chatting to us today, Alla, and certainly wish you all the best.
Thanks, Dani, and thanks for all you're doing for all the hospo people. Thanks so much. And also thanks for letting me ramble, because I realise what a lack of construction that whole conversation was.
I think that's a beautiful conversation, and you were worried that we wouldn't be able to chat for a couple of minutes. So we've actually managed to have a good old chin work, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Talk soon.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.